What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoner's Rift Team's live pod, talking about a champion getting changed in about 2 weeks' time. Corki coming to a patch 14.10 near you in about, again, 2 weeks' time. As of time of recording, the patch notes for 14.9 are coming out in about 12 hours. Pretty soon after that, you'll see 14.10 update onto the PBE, and inside that patch is going to be a large-scale kit update to Corki that, I think is a long time coming, and I am happy is going into League of Legends. So let's talk about why there are Corki changes coming into 14.10. Number one, I like Corki a lot. Corki was my probably first main when I started playing League of Legends a lot. Back in 2009, I was in the closed beta, and I wanted to be good. And so what I did was I looked at a random, like the most recent sort of community-run closed beta tournament, and I took stock of every champion that was picked from like semifinals onward and put them into a big list of, up to 30 champions, but of course they are repeats. And I said, okay, well, what are the champions that the best players are playing right now? That'll be my champion pool. And so among them was a lot of emphasis on Corki, and so I became a Corki main. From the very beginning, I try to play the strong things. And so I was a Corki main for a long time. There was a while where people considered me the best Corki player in the world. This would have been like 2009, 2010, well before they were like a real established pro scene. But he was my first main. He was a really cool champion. We did a champ spotlight on him because I knew the champ pretty well. Don't look it up. It's a pretty bad video. It's 15 years old, basically. Anyway, I'm a big Corki fan. That said, Corki is a very boring champion to watch. His kit, I think, is not in a very good state for a spectator sport. I think to play him, he's fine. But ultimately, he has such a negative effect on pro play because his optimal gameplay pattern is so boring that we have to leave him intentionally weak. And that sucks. That's pretty bad. Additionally, the types of builds that players think make sense on him actually aren't that good. So there's like various mismatches here as well. And ultimately that all makes me sad, right? Because I like Corki a lot. I want this champion to be good. I want him to be allowed to be good. And so that's that. The random note here, February 16th, is when I started this project in earnest. I had discussions with people about this several times over the last, year or so. But February 16th was when I basically there's like a monthly suggested take PTO day on League of Legends gameplay, and I took that Friday and instead went to the office and built a Corki update. And then it wasn't high priority. It wasn't that we'd scheduled, but it was like, hey, well, if there's ever free time, if we're doing a play test and there are no test points in the bottom lane, do we mind slotting Corki in there and getting feedback once in a while? And so he's kind of on the back burner for a while, but we eventually got some playtest coverage and got some learnings. And every time I had some free time, I'd either like cut a lunch break short or something, but I decided I wanted to work on Corki. And so now that's been about 2.5 months. This is basically ready. We slotted it into patch 14.10. We could have gone 14.9 and rescheduled some time, but ultimately decided to do it in a patch that is already going to be fairly large. And so it's just kind of a good time to ship Corki in there because I think it just fits. So ultimately, this project took off and on about 2 months, and he's coming out in 14.10. Okay, great. So let's talk about the goals of the update, because just saying, hey, I want to fix, being in pro jail isn't doing anything. Like, make him exciting is not a goal. I mean, it kind of is, but like, it's not a direction for an update, right? So let's talk about the goals here. So number one, I actually want Corki to be a bot laner again. As it stands right now, there are very few champions that are bot laners. If you sort League of Legends by pick rate, you will always see like 3 AD carries at the top of the pile because there just aren't as many, and bot laners pretty much refuse to play other champions. So if you want champion variety, which I think is a pretty useful, fairly high-level goal for League of Legends, the more champions you can make bot laners that bot laners will actually play, aka they look like marksmen, they feel like marksmen, the better champ variety you get, which is probably a pretty good thing. So in general, I don't mind if Corki is also a mid laner. That's not a problem here. It's not a failure, but the fact that Corki can be played in bot lane again is a primary goal. Second, Corki has a long-range dash and some long-range spells. If Corki is a safe, generic scaling marksman, we've got a lot of those already, especially when they're safe. That's a really bad thing because then there's no agency for anyone else. You just kite everybody, you deal full damage for maximum range, and gameplay quality of safe and late game carry, I think, is pretty poor on average, and so try not to do that very much. In general, probably a good idea. So make him not a generic safe scaling marksman. Okay, fine. That is a constraint more than a goal, but considering that right now he is a safe long range scaling marksman, fix that, right? And so ultimately it's let's have Corki do hype things. His title is the Daring Bombardier. Let's try to make him daring. Let's try to make him aggressive. Let's try to make him have to go in and do things to do his job correctly. Okay, great. And again, we just want him to be able to sustain a real win rate without making pro play boring. This isn't like much more than the wise statement above, but ultimately these are sort of the like, hey, this update is working correctly if he's a good bot laner. This update is working correctly if Corki is not just a safe scaling bot laner. This update is working correctly if players feel like, yes, Corki is aggressive and we think he's going to be not boring in pro play. Whatever tactics you do, if it ladders up to these goals, then these tactics have been correct. Okay, great. So we've gone one order down. We've gone one level down. Let's go to the actual tactics, right? Here are the actual things we're trying to achieve, right? These are the actual feelings we're looking for here. So let's make Corki a short range aggro champion, right? Let's make changes that directly make him a short range aggro champion. In order to make him a bot laner, let's make him heavily cooperative. Let's tune things around in the kit to make cooperative gameplay correct here, to make sure that he actually wants to play in a 2-on-2, and that it's like a very, very good thing for him. Want to reward basic attacking? He has 550 auto attack range. He has normal marksman auto attack range, and so if a lot of his success is predicated on being in auto attack range, this means that he can't succeed on just being a poke champion. So it's like pretty heavily reward basic attacking. We're going to remove the package. The package is going away from Corki. This is probably his most pro skewed aspect. I think it was a pretty noble idea to try way back when to give him sort of a real ultimate that didn't fit a normal ultimate paradigm. Really cool investigation, some interesting stuff there. But at the end of the day, having an ability on a 5-minute long cooldown, it's not very effective in solo queue where the game is chaotic and people fight constantly. In pro play, where people are incredibly coordinated and will wait and just farm waves and do nothing and play low risk until the next dragon comes up, is the exact timing of package. That is not a great thing. It's why the last time we did pro nerfs to Corki, we went after the package because, yeah. Of course, getting rid of the package does remove some of the Daring Bombardier type stuff, right? It was a way for him to dive in melee range, and so we had to make sure that we re-added incentives to play in melee range and actually try to land some damage on people. Okay, great. And then to just ensure that we're not getting a late game scaling marksman, we're going to early game skew the champion overall. Not to make his late game bad per se. I mean, he's an auto attack marksman. It's not going to be bad by any means. But, relative to other marksmen, like, yeah, it's probably going to be worse than Kog'Maw, worse than Jinx, worse than a lot of the champions, and that's fine. He's going to be early game skewed. What's nice is actually, there aren't a lot of easy to play early game skewed champions. Like, Varus is like a pretty good laner, but I wouldn't call him a lane bully. But like Draven is hard to play, Kallista's hard to play, Lucian's pretty hard to play. There aren't a lot of easy to play lane bullies, and Corki is not complex. And so actually having a space for an easy to play lane bully, and maybe even if you're autofilled ADC and you're like, oh shoot, they're playing this hyperscaling comp, they've got, Lulu Kog'Maw or something, or Yumi Zeri or something. It's like, oh, we should play a lane bully. Oh, I can play Corki, he's easy, let's go. So there's like some value there. It wasn't like a primary goal to make him easy or easier, but Corki is fairly easy. And hey, there's actually a pretty good position strategically in the roster for an easy to play early game skewed champion. Okay, great. Let's start talking about the individual changes themselves. Now that we're, on board, hopefully, with what's going on with Corki, what we're trying to do with Corki, and what's going to make him hopefully more fun. So the passive is getting changed. Hextech Munitions, remove the package. The package is gone. Goodbye to the package. Obviously, this is a fairly meaningful amount of win rate going away, so he's got to get buffed. Corki is already a pretty bad champion. He's bad, and we're removing part of his kit that gave him power. Obviously, a lot of power has to be added back in, and so we are bringing back the old passive. It's better than before. It is bonus true damage on auto attacks, including Sheen. So what's interesting is old Corki just simply said, if you auto or if you crit, you'll get some bonus damage as true damage. Okay, great. It did not interact with Sheen, did not interact with Trinity Force, it didn't interact with all those things. Trinity Force is good because you had a low cooldown spell on R, but otherwise there was no interaction. When Corki passive was changed to deal, initially it was 100% magic damage on all of his auto attacks. The Spellblade system scripting was re-architected to say if you have Corki passive, deal all the damage as magic damage. Now, to be fair, magic damage is generally stronger than physical damage. People have less MR than armor, so that is a buff. Anyway, I went in and changed the scripting to say if you have Corki passive, deal 15% more damage as true damage. So the old Corki back in 2009 didn't have bonus true damage on the passive. Now he does. Congratulations. Corki is cool guy. Great. Congratulations. Your Sheen is superior now. It does not work on other effects. The tooltip will explicitly say your autos. It will imply very heavily that your crits, and it will explicitly say your Spellblade effects will get bonus damage as well. This will not empower Blade of the Ruin King. This champion does not print percent health true damage. He is not Vayne. This is not going to, interact with Rage Blade. It's not going to interact with getting bonus on hit effects. It will interact with Hurricane. I tested it literally today. If you land a Hurricane Bolt, you'll do half as much damage. If it crits, congratulations. It will, do all the things there. So Toxic Munitions is all auto attacks, all crits, and Sheen effects specifically get 15% bonus damage as true damage. Now, I want to be clear about something. Despite how good this looks, this is actually not that strong of a buff compared to dealing magic damage in a road where you weren't building LDR or flat pent or anything. Because, again, champions have more armor than magic resist, and so converting to magic damage was actually a very, very big deal. This is obviously very, very good in the early game when the stats are tied. 50% more damage is 50% more damage. But as you go to the late game, this is not strictly more powerful, although it can really depend on what you're facing and what's going on here. Okay, moving on to Phosphorus Bomb. Actually, some of these changes came in quite late. A lot of them came in today as we got more feedback on the champion. But ultimately, trying to play up a slightly stronger bread and butter ability, since we're making him less about Missile Barrage, and we are making his auto attacks better in a couple of different ways, which we'll talk about later on. He needs ability that he can kind of rely on, kind of spam out, and feel good about. So the first thing that came in day one was 10% faster missile speed on the Q. Technically, Q has two different missiles. There is the normal missile that you're used to seeing, and there's a short range missile if you cast, I forget what the range is, like 300 or less or something like that, but it casts a different missile instead, and that short range missile has a fixed travel time. On live, that fixed travel time is a quarter second. What that is going down to is basically 10% less than a quarter second, roughly 9% less than a quarter second, because the missile speed is going up by 10%, did the math, and it's like 0.227 or whatever it is. So short range missile is about 9% faster, actual missile itself, 10% faster. Basically, the math all works out the same, trust me. Either way, Q is going to be easier to land. Q is one of the most fair skills in the game. I would argue too fair, and so Phosphorus Bomb, going to be easier to land. AD ratio being buffed. Now, I'm specifically going for AD ratio and ranks 4 and 5 of the cooldown are getting buffed here. So specifically, I am cognizant of how bursty Corki can be at level 9, which is actually very bursty. His spells are all quite offensive. They all deal direct damage to his opponent. Oftentimes, they are quite hard to dodge. If you Valkyrie forwards, right, Q is very easy to hit, R is very easy to hit. Like, this is all just very meaningful. And so I was cognizant of his burst overall and didn't want to give him too much stronger of a level 9 power spike. What I instead wanted to do was say, well, once you get to level 9, congratulations, your Q cooldown is shorter. Instead of 8 seconds, it's 7. And as a result, you're going to be able to put out more damage the more gold you gain as you level up. As you earn gold, as you get more attack damage, as you empower this ability, you get to cast it a whole lot more, 12% more often. And so that mixed with an AD ratio buff says that we're going to give you some late game via gold scaling, not via level scaling, because again, we're trying to make sure his strengths line up in bot lane, less so in mid lane, and so trying to somewhat play down gaining levels, but play up gaining gold. Mana cost also buffed, just softening the mana cost per rank up from plus 10 to plus 5. So just, again, making Q rank up feel better, make it more valuable. It's already his default first max. This is going to be even more true with a better mana cost rank up, with a better cooldown rank up, and the spell just being better on overall. So obviously a strict buff to Phosphorus Bomb. Again, this champion is currently weak, and we're removing the package, so this champion, of course, needs buffs. Next one, not terribly exciting, but a pretty big deal under the hood. Rebuilding Valkyrie. There's actually a lot of rescripting being done here. Ultimately, though, being rescripted closer to modern standards, did a whole bunch of updates on particles. Around the particle size of the burn on the ground, the spamminess of the particle when you actually damage an enemy champion. The way it was scripted before is basically every quarter second it would try to reapply W to you, and at the same time would also then play the hit effect particle of the W, which made it actually very, very spammy. If you just stopped and looked at what happened when you Valkyried over an enemy champion, it looked really ugly. Of course, these are particles from 2009. I assume they would not pass today's art bar, but also them triggering every quarter second looks really ugly as well. And so Did a bunch of changes here. So now the particles only play when the unit takes damage. And as I mentioned, or wrote here, the damage flow logic has been rescripted. Ultimately, the way Valkyrie works on live is you almost always miss the last damage tick. You very, very, very commonly, against a stationary target dummy in melee range, cast W, and you will not get the full 150 to 450 damage. Most often, you will not. That sucks. That's really silly. And so I rescripted Valkyrie to be based on a dot instead. This dot deals damage in half-second increments because that is the rate that I think makes sense for dot effects, period, in League of Legends. I think dots should always deal damage in half-second increments. That is my strong opinion. You may disagree. That's fine. That's how I feel about this, though. To me, it gives a good mix between the hits feeling chunky and looking chunky and getting a good repetitive feedback loop of I am damaging you, you're clearly on fire, I'm hitting you repeatedly, and getting, it's just a good mix of reactivity and heft, kind of. So anyway, I rescripted the W to instead be a dot with a target max damage. So under the hood, there is a max damage on W, there is a max AP ratio on W, and there's scripting that says, okay, well listen, when I apply this to you, like prorate the damage, and then apply the dot. And the dot's going to keep track. This dot's going to say, look, the maximum damage that I'm allowed to deal is this amount or this number of ticks. It's actually this number of ticks. And I know that I took an upfront hit. And I know that that upfront hit plus the other number of ticks needs to equal out to this amount of damage. And so you do a bunch of like math on the front end at the very beginning, and you say, okay, here's the damage per hit. Go hit them 5 times. This now means that if I Valkyrie on you point blank, you will take damage up until the point that the particle times out, because that is the timing put into the skill. That is the duration put into the dot, that is the number of ticks put into the dot, that is just like all the things, like just like basically taking a bunch of details and saying, if I pick this number and this number and this number and this number, what's going to happen is if you stand a Valkyrie the whole time, the effects will all disappear at the same time, basically. An additional addition here is not only are you getting 10% more damage because you're not going to kind of fail here, I've also added a linger to the dot. What that means is it's totally possible that you run off the fire and then take 1, potentially 2 ticks at the end. I believe it can only be 1 tick. It can be 2, because you can like move off the carpet, immediately take damage, and then before the thing falls off, you can take a second tick. So you can theoretically flash off the carpet and take 2 ticks. I think that is reasonable personally. If it's not, I can always shorten the extension on this thing, but I think it's reasonable. But basically to say, yeah, you ran onto some fiery ground, you essentially got lit on fire. When you take the damage each tick, you see like a fiery explosion on you. I think it is reasonable for a player to assume that they are essentially burning at this point in time. If it doesn't feel right on PBE, we can tweak these things. We can easily tweak the linger duration on this, but right now Valkyrie has a moderately generous linger that rewards Corki himself. A lot of the logic here was to try to make Valkyrie a rewarding forward aggressive ability. That Valkyring at your opponents, Valkyring on your opponents should be really good. And so not only does the tooltip say, hey, look at this max damage, look how much damage we can deal, this can be a lot, look at this, really good base damage, look at this really good ratio, this is very effective. It's reasonably inexpensive as a spell. The cooldown is certainly, pretty rough, but that's fine. It's a, cost you have to pay. But adding the linger as well says, okay, like, if I Valkyrie at you and I get over the top of you and I land this on you, I'm going to get almost certainly 3 guaranteed ticks here. It means I'm going to get more than half the damage of the spell. I'm going to get about 100 damage on you if I can Valkyrie over the top of you. I think that's quite good. I think that's really beneficial, and this gives him a really strong incentive to Valkyrie forward and play as a daring bombardier. Okay. Gatling Gun is, I would say, probably the second biggest set of changes behind... Okay, third behind passive than R. So Gatling Gun is, again, we need a lot of buffs here because we removed the package champion's already weak. So we buffed the cooldown substantially from 16 seconds to 12. That's the current tuning. It's feeling really good. Keep in mind that Gatling Gun has a very, very high base damage, a very, very high bonus AD ratio, and is honestly pretty generous in terms of its ability to hit things. So having... Oh, it's also the mana cost is very low. It's only 50 right now. At rank 1, it goes up with rank, though. So with a cooldown going to 12 seconds, you have a lot of opportunities to just kind of Gatling Gun and walk at your opponent and get a pretty good amount of damage here. Now, keep in mind, Corki's basic move speed is lowest in the game. He's 325. Also, if he just walks at you forever, you can trade back. Keep in mind, if he doesn't walk past your mini wave, his R is going to get blocked. Of course, his Q is a real spell, but okay, whatever. But you can trade back onto him without too much difficulty if he really just walks at you. But this gives him a lot of reliable forward aggressive damage that is, again, just like very straightforward, but quite good. So the cooldown, a lot lower. Again, the mana cost is cheap, the base damage is good. This is a spell that's worth casting, and it's worth casting a lot, and you're going to be able to cast it a lot. And because you can cast a spell essentially 1/3 more times or 1/4 more times, that is a lot of potential damage throughput. But we're going to play this up even more. The shred is getting substantially buffed. It's being the max shred is being increased, and the rate at which the shred stacks up to max is also being increased. Essentially, you should assume your target is max shredded very quickly with Gatling Gun. It will full stack within 1 second instead of within 2 seconds, which just does matter because not only Gatling Gun itself deals more damage because your opponent has less armor for more of it, but because the shred is increased, they're going to have just less armor period, and thus even if the base damage is technically nerfed, the shred buffs mean the damage is actually not nerfed, and in some cases just strictly buffed. Plus, again, you can cast it more often, so Gatling Gun is just a better skill. Now, the one thing I do want to bring up, though, is that the damage has been converted from half physical, half magic to pure physical damage. That, of course, is a guaranteed nerf late game, though keep in mind you are still shredding armor, which matters. It is, of course, synergistic with yourself and your teammate. I wanted to play up cooperativeness, and so a lower cooldown, more max shred, and a faster shred rate, all of which say when your teammate is Leona, when your teammate is Nami, when your teammate is Nautilus, they're going to do even more damage than your opponent. You put Gatling Gun on them, you're going to kill them together. That's a very big deal here, and so that's a really big hit, even if the theoretical solo damage on E is maybe a bit lower, despite the shred and cooldown buffs. Moving on to Missile Barrage, as I mentioned, the second biggest set of changes, quite a lot here. First, I want to bring up that there was a potential set of Corki changes that would have come out last year. A designer who was on SRT, who went over to Teamfight Tactics, was trying a Corki mid-scope, had tried some stuff, ultimately got it down to a fairly small change list that we were considering shipping. As he left the TFT, he left us with the project. We ultimately decided not to ship anything here. But there were pieces of it that I actually liked. And so I kind of brought up, I literally just like resurrected his scripting. I just found the version history and kind of added it back in. But essentially, first one is just some quality of life for Corki. When you rank up R, you're going to get 3 ammo. So, you know, when you first learn R, you get 3 ammo. So congratulations, you're Corki, you learn R, bam, here's some ammo, have fun, buddy. So at level 6, you have at least, you know, half your ultimate because you can shoot out 3 shots plus, you know, whatever else going on. Next thing is actually going down to the second thing that he added, which is you will get a refund on your ammo whenever you auto attack an enemy champion. This is, again, champion only, not minions, not monsters, not whatever, but saying that, look, if you can auto-attack enemy champions, again, wanted to play up auto-attack as an important part of this kit now, you're going to get more rockets back, and it's going to be where the lion's share, or at least a decent portion of your rocket refunding is going to come from. It's very important that you actually auto-attack enemy champions. And then alongside that is, of course, a nerf to the rate at which ammo accrues passively, and a nerf to the maximum stacks you can have of your ultimate ammo. These are both pretty meaningful. There's also a mana cost nerf. That doesn't mean a whole lot because the spell is relatively cheap in the first place. But essentially it says that 3 rock is going to cost you as much as a real ultimate would cost you. And it's going to have a functional cooldown of about a minute because that's how long it's going to take you to get 3 ammo back. Now, your max stack cap is still 6. You can still essentially shoot out 2 ultimates, but shooting out 2 ultimates will cost you 200 mana and take you 2 minutes to get all those rockets back unless you auto-attack. Auto-attacking is going to be a very easy way to get rockets back. If you come into a fight with full rockets, you will never run out as long as you're autoing in the fight. It is basically impossible to run out as long as you're able to auto. Remotely at all during the fight here. So it's not a real constraint when actively team fighting. It is a very real constraint when trying to play poke, when trying to do a dragon standoff. You will run out of ultis if this happens. And so it's a pretty heavy swing because we're trying to pretty heavily switch the gameplay pattern here of this spell while still being pretty clearly an auto attack spell weaver. The Sheen synergy here is still very, very valuable. Next thing though is converting the spell to physical damage. Converting the total AD ratio to a bonus AD ratio, and no longer having that AD ratio scale with rank. This means that though there is still a rank up incentive on R because it's going to increase the base damage, it is no longer going to increase the rate at which you accrue ammo. It is no longer going to increase the rate at which your gold increases your damage. So while in the new version of Corki, a level 16 R might do 100 more damage than a level 15 version of R, if you compare that to live Corki, that base damage is there, plus your gold scaling is 50% stronger, plus your ammo recoup is faster. That is a lot of level scaling for a champion that we don't want to skew so heavily toward mid lane. And so we're saying, no, you can have pretty good gold scaling. That's still meant to be good. The current AD ratio is, I believe, close to or at the old max rank AD ratio. And by the way, level 16 is not a typical rank to hit. So in actual practice, Corki has a better AD ratio on R. But because this thing is physical damage, this means a level 17 Jax with a Frozen Heart is going to take a lot less damage from your R, unless you can compensate for it by getting a Last Whisper upgrade or doing something else, or relying on your E-Shred to bring his armor down a little bit more and getting you closer there. And so this is obviously a fairly big deal. Converting to physical damage certainly matters. We also, on a note, are removing the AP ratio on this spell. We want Corki to build normal auto attack AD items. Right now, crit and generic caster builds are pretty close together in power level. One thing we're going to try to solve is making crit look like it's actually a good set of stats. I think this is pretty solvable though. But basically, yeah, moving Missile Barrage around to scale less strongly on champion level, less strongly on rank, and instead just be a good spell kind of no matter what, so that you can be level 13 and get a lot of value out of the ultimate. Then finally, some base stat tweaks to make him just a little bit nicer overall. Because his champion has basically 15% free bonus attack damage and base attack damage, his base AD is quote-unquote nerfed. He is still functionally the highest base AD in the game. That said, if you want to consider Draven Q a passive, he's not doing as much per auto as Draven Q. He's in many cases not doing as much per auto as like Lucian, if you count his passive for everything. That's obviously a little bit fake at a certain point. But, you know, his base AD is nerfed. But yeah, his damage per auto is just better in all cases. If you have a Sat Shard, you have a Dorn's Blade, it's clearly better in all real-world scenarios. This champion has very, very good auto attacks and very, very good last hitting as a result. It makes him very, very easy to clear minions on. We're buffing his attack speed. As I mentioned, we want to make sure he has the right incentives to feel like auto attacking. So there is a base attack speed and attack speed ratio buff here that amounts to, this is going to sound small, but it's pretty meaningful, 1% more attack speed. That's, you know, it means something. It does something for the champion. Again, not a ton, but he's going to be better at it, is the math there. We are tweaking around some more base stats to make him have more durability early, but less durability late game. This, once again, makes him care less about getting to level 18 in mid lane, but also amps up his stats to make sure that he can go for these level 1 extended trades. He can hold Gatling Gun on you and take your trades back because he functionally can't dodge skill shots because he has to just sit there facing you to deal all of his damage. Otherwise, he's losing a lot of output of the E. So that's basically the changes themselves on paper. A couple of other minor thoughts to bring up. One thing that was interesting was because we replaced several parts of the kit, we had to update his Eternals. And so this was my first sort of big taste with working with the team that handles Eternals, and so working with a designer who was assigned to work on Corki for his Eternals update. And we basically it was kind of interesting. So the way some of the like interesting design cornerstones for Eternals is they want there to be ones that kind of count up forever, that like you expect to get 15,000 of something over the course of a game, and some things that you're going to get like 6 of over a game. And so it was fun to like figure out which ones are going to go to 6, which ones are going to go to 1,500 or whatever. And so I think we chose you know, one of the ones was simple, which was just total damage dealt by the true damage passive. One of them was total damage earned via the shred on E, which I think is actually pretty cool to see like how much you're getting out of that skill overall. And then I forget there was one more, but we did like one other thing. I think it was like takedowns because you hit with Valkyrie, which I think was inherited from the old one, but we're still keeping it because it's meant to be as aggressive as old package was. I think there might be one more, but I forget. Regardless, there were a couple other things that we tried. I attempted to put a slow on the W. So the first version was just if you are on the dot field, you get slowed by some amount. And this allowed me to say, oh yeah, your Valkyrie, oh yeah, also Valkyrie had more range. Valkyrie had 300 range at us, so it was 900 instead of 600 dash range. And so there's 900 range dash with a pretty meaningful slow attached. And this meant that he was really, really inescapable in lane. if he wanted to kill you and he was ahead, you just died, because 900 range plus 550 auto attack range plus a pretty guaranteed slow was a lot. A lot. Yes, Tristana can kind of do this as well, but this was just like even more aggressive and just sort of, it was just overall just kind of felt stronger. And so, yeah, that was a lot. And so we nerfed him enough because he was overtuned for a little bit, and said, okay, well, you know, can we keep this slow? And once he stopped being like, oh, I just always one-shot you and I kill you, it meant that he was unchaseable, because if, you know, someone comes to gank you, or, you know, Leona runs at you or whatever, even if she lands the E, you just Valkyrie backwards, and now there's a slow fuel on the ground for 2.5 seconds that clearly no one could ever chase you on. And so Corki became automatically the safest marksman of the game. And so we cut the slow because it clearly wasn't working. And we kept the 900 range for a while. And with 900 range, it still didn't work, because even with his current 600 range dash, you're basically always in range to then land autos or press Q or whatever. And again, your auto range is 550. If your dash is 600, you have basically 1150 threat range, which is more than enough to generally follow up on a Thresh hook or a Nautilus hook or a Leona ult or whatever. It wasn't really a problem. Meanwhile, you look at, you know, trying to like gank this guy, and it's like, nah, dude, I dashed 900 range away. You're never getting me. And yeah, sure, it's not slowing anymore, but like if I chase you in a straight line, I'm still taking 150 damage from Valkyrie. And so, you know, even if I do chase you, you're probably in a spot where you can just kind of fight me back. And so it ended up being way too good as an escape tool. And so basically it came down to the only buffs on Valkyrie being essentially rescripting it to deal the damage reliably, especially in offensive cases where they might hop off the field pretty quickly, but also just dealing his damage reliably, so that like even if you do have them stun locked and, you know, Nautilus lands Q into R or R into Q or whatever, and you Valkyrie over the top, you will actually get the tooltip damage because it's guaranteed now via the scripting. Those are kind of the big ones. Ultimately, that is the preview of the Corki heading to PBE in about 14 hours. I'm happy with this. I don't think it is, to be fair, like the end-all be-all sickest possible ever Corki kit. I was pretty much optimizing for what are things that I'm confident are meaningful incremental gains on the champion that can bring this champion back to playable, back to fun, back to a kit that people will want to play, and one that we are more willing to allow be strong, and make sure he has a gameplay pattern of aggression and not just simply being a very safe poke bot with a backwards dash. And so it was pretty much optimized for that. There weren't a lot of dead ends I ran down, only because I think there are a lot of things that are worthy of time and effort and focus. And though I probably could have tried, like, what if we made a new spell for Corki and gave him a new Q or something? I have no idea what we would try. That's a lot of investigation that I think other champs would be better served on. And so I honestly didn't take a lot of risks here. But hopefully the changes are fun. Hopefully the kit is enjoyable. If you get a chance to play on PBE tomorrow, let me know how it feels. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.